Hi, welcome to Gotta Ping, a careers podcast you should listen to if you want to grow your career online and offline. Hi, my name is Mei Ping, and I'm a professional career coach and international speaker with more than a decade of experience at some of the biggest companies in the world. To learn more about what I do, visit meiping.com. That's meiping.com. All right, let's jump right into today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of my Got a Ping podcast, a podcast that you should listen to if you are serious about growing your corporate career. So, welcome back to another episode. And right now, we are in my 30-day client success story series where I will be sharing with you stories of clients who have worked with me in a one-on-one capacity or attended my training workshop and how they have managed to transform their career, reduce problems, minimize, eliminate problems at the workplace and in their career to be really able to move forward and advance in their corporate career. So if you missed out any of the earlier episodes, remember to check out the playlist on my channel or on my podcast. All right, today I want to share with you a client who has worked with me last year, and we are still working together right now. And to me, this story is quite interesting. Again, this client is also a top performer in his previous role. And as you all know, as part of career advancement, most people will end up applying for maybe a better company or a better position, a more senior leadership position to continue to get more exposure as well as more opportunities and more importantly, more pay, right? That's what we are all focused on in our career, or at least most of us, I think. So this client, on the outside, right, from the outside, right, he seems like a fairly confident guy. He's been quite involved in a lot of leadership activities that's outside of his full-time job. But what I found interesting is that when he first came to me, he was actually quite frustrated, and he told me that he has been in this new prestigious company for 8 months and it's getting worse day by day. So I asked him, okay, can you tell me a little bit more and what exactly is going on? So when he started telling me the story, I noticed that he consistently talked about his previous job. Why this new company, doesn't operate like the previous job. Why the new team members are this way. Why his new boss is this way. Why is the culture this way. Why. So now, I don't want to discount, critical thinking, and I also don't want to discount, analytical thinking as well. But I do think it's important to recognize that if you are consistently comparing one company to the other, one department to the other, right? Different team members, different people, then there is one thing that you need to recognize, and that is should you even be comparing in the first place? I think that is really the fundamental issue that you need to think about. And particularly for this client, I noticed that he was stuck in a mindset of the past because in his previous job, he was actually doing pretty well, one of the high performers, but somehow when he joined this new company, he couldn't quite replicate that. And as I mentioned to you guys before, and even in my previous client success story series, I mentioned that if you work with a top performer or high performer, or even somebody who did really well in their university studies, some kind of achievement per se, when they are suddenly put in a situation where they don't get their way, or they're not getting the kind of I guess results that they had expected, it damages their mindset. It kind of also damages their self-esteem as well as self-confidence. So the natural reaction is to complain, to blame and complain. In fact, it's actually quite normal, and I do see that in a lot of my clients as well. So the first session with this client was really to identify what was the root cause. And after all these complaints that he has been telling me, and he also told me that in a lot of his previous jobs, like for 10 years he has been working, he has always done really well, right? He always felt very valued, and that his bosses and teams are very happy with his performance. So he finds it very difficult to understand why this current company, this current team, these current team members were, in his words, not up to expectation or not up to par with the standards that he's expecting. So this is actually quite common because most of us go into a job and we have this sort of like expectation versus reality on what needs to happen. And I actually did talk about this in some of my other episodes as well. And in fact, this whole expectation versus reality thing is so fundamental before you can even do a good job. That's why nowadays in my 2-week boost your confidence and soft skills at work training, I always start with expectations versus reality as the first module that we talk about. Because if you don't set your expectations correctly, you don't reset that kind of like beginner's mindset when you join a new company, then it will definitely not work out. Right? And that was really what this particular client experienced, because he thought that since he did really well in his previous job, he should be able to replicate. So the keyword here is he thought he should be able to replicate without really putting in the effort to learn about the culture, right? His boss's priorities, what are some of his team members' backgrounds, so that he can better lead them and manage them as a director. So this is really a combination of problems between of expectation versus reality, as well as, I think, probably leadership and management skills is something that still needed to be enhanced. And furthermore, he as a person, like personality wise, he is a little bit introverted and a little bit focused on the feelings part, but I think mostly introverted. So if you guys know, I always talk about personality as the main driver of how you think, how you feel, how you make decisions, how you behave at the workplace. And for this particular client, he also couldn't escape that. So in fact, as introverts, sometimes we have the tendency of making assumptions, and that's not a good thing. So he also fell into the making assumptions trap, and just assuming what his team members or like his manager, his boss was supposed to be doing for his sake, but never really looking at the other side. So understanding dynamics is definitely really important. But I think for this particular client, definitely had to start with mindset. So a lot of these sessions I worked with him was, at least for the first few sessions, was really like breaking the fixed mindset on assuming past equals present. Past, present, and future, we need to keep growing and keep learning. It should not stay stagnant. Of course, we can take some lessons from the past, but we shouldn't necessarily expect that, right? Past success equals future success. It may not necessarily be the case, particularly for this client who moved from the private sector into public sector. He took on a promotion. He joined a very, very niche industry that is filled with experts. So obviously expectation and even technical soft skill ability is all to the next level. And I think he was not exactly prepared for that. So the good news is that at least after a couple of sessions, right, he started accepting that this is the current reality. And if he really wants to do well, that's something that he really need to look forward, which I think is a really positive development. And from there on, we started working more around the soft skills part. So how to manage his portfolio, how to actually have one-on-one conversations that can motivate his team members, how to understand his team members' personality, how to align expectations with his boss, how to appear as a valuable professional, valuable director in front of his CEO, in which he also has a little bit of face time. So I think him breaking through that kind of like, I think, mindset block and limitation really allows us to work at the next level. So of course, right, occasionally the natural part of his personality does come into play. Like sometimes after a while, if we don't, because he's really quite busy, so sometimes we don't check in as often. And I find that if it's been a long time since the check-in, then sometimes clients end up moving backwards, which is not good. So that's why for all my clients, I told them that we need to have a check-in every 4 to 6 weeks, because anything that is a little bit more than that, then most of the time they will then backtrack, and then we have to actually restart the entire process again, which is not very productive. So I think the good news for this client is that over time he also started to recognize that, okay, actually he could contribute, and instead of being very bitter and unhappy about it, actually that is not good for his professional reputation. So then he woke up and said that, okay, I'm thinking short term because, expectation versus reality, and I'm reacting to it negatively, which is really a short term reaction, but he was really forgetting about the ultimate long term goal of what kind of exposure and opportunities that he could really get in this position, which is definitely better than the previous company. That's why he made the move. So that's it for this story. I hope that this story inspires you and actually get you thinking about, what is an emotional reaction of directly, assuming that past successes must equal future success, on whether you are having also such mindset blocks as my client, and more importantly, what are you doing to actually overcome those mindset blocks? Because if you let this perpetuate, it could potentially affect your professional reputation and maybe even limit your career opportunities later on, because you may be seen as a person who is unable to adapt once you are put into a challenging or maybe slightly different environment. All right, that's it for today's episode of my 30-day client success story series. I hope that this story inspires you and also empowers you to really think about how you are balancing short-term versus long-term, and if you are even facing any sort of mindset blocks, and more importantly, what actions are you taking to move forward. So with that, I hope that in the meantime, you feel empowered and you are actually taking action towards career growth. So with that, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. For more awesome content like this, remember to like and subscribe. Also, head on over to my website, meiping.com, that's meiping.com, and subscribe to my weekly newsletter for more career growth and personal development tips. You can find the links in the description box below. Once again, you're listening to Got a Ping, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!